publishing house.
Although he was the iconic comic writer in the world, he was only, as I remember, selling something like 15 or 20,000 hardback books. That's not a great many. And this puzzled him. Is it true, he would say, that sex and money were the only things that people really wanted to read about in books? I can't do that sort of thing, he said.
Woodhouse's work appeared in the magazines which signified changing times, but for the eternal innocent, sex remained out of bounds.
Beds, in all the Woodhouse work, beds are things you hide something under, or you hide under yourself. They have no other use, or you're woken up with your morning tea by your man. They have no other place in human life.
Of course, when I started writing, sex was absolutely taboo. You couldn't even hint at it. But I suppose one got set in one's ways.
Certainly he wasn't going to stop writing, and he certainly wasn't going to change the way that he was writing. But I think he felt remote from where what you would call the market was. And that was one of the reasons why he didn't ever come back to England. I think he honestly felt that if he had arrived in Southampton, he would have surely come by sea, that nobody would have come out to meet him. I think the truth is quite otherwise. I think there would have been bunting, there would have been a vast crowd of people just to set eyes on him, touch his sleeve.
Would you say his life was enormously happy while he was in America?
He cut himself off, I think, from a lot of the realities of life. I think he was people understand, he was desperately sad not to come back to this country.
Did he miss England? Did he ask you about how things were?
I think there were three things he wanted above all else, was to see rural England, was to, I think, get back to Dulwich, just go to Dulwich and see it, walk round it and talk, and go to a test match, a cricket test match.
Although past his 90th birthday, Woodhouse still talked of returning to England.
I don't know, I find it very altered. I suppose I would. After 34, how long is it? 30 years, isn't it? Long time.
In the meantime, he carried on writing as he always had, amid signs that an old era of judgment had been begun. To his delight in the library at Dulwich College, measured for a waxwork, at Madame Tussauds, and then, in the final act of rehabilitation, P.G. Woodhouse gets to 90 and finally gets the knighthood.
I think he was thrilled by that. I mean, there'd been a big debate within the British establishment during the Wilson and Heath years as to whether he should be given one. There was a lot of toing and froing. Wilson was in favour of it, and finally it was given in January '75. The same batch, so to speak, as Charlie Chaplin. And Woodhouse says that he has said a rather lovely thing. When the news came through, he says, so that's that then. He'd been absolved, and he'd be given his pardon.
I think it's a sort of graceful act on the part of the government, sort of more or less saying, well, that's that, you know.
But sadly, the knighthood in some ways was the end of him, because he was swamped with fan mail, he felt obliged to answer it, and he developed a skin condition which put him into hospital, and then the hospital led to a heart attack, and he died on St. Valentine's Day, 75.
The good writers normally deal with death, suffering, pain, divorce, adultery, and sexuality. He avoids all those things, writes magnificent books, and manages to write books that will be read as long as anybody else's books.
Woodhouse has created characters that live for people who've never picked up one of the novels. And that is a sign of a really great writer. You can create a character that walks off the pages and into the world. Amazing. And I find that whatever the circumstances, there was a point where my daughter was really very, very desperately ill, and the only thing I could do was read Woodhouse. It got me through the most hideous time.
It also left behind a feeling that you can be funny without being cruel. You can be nice and charming without being boring. I love that.
The people I most envy on earth are those who've never read any Woodhouse, who pick up their first book, because they now have 90 books to get through, and people have such sheer pleasure ahead of them. There's no pleasure I know like it, and I envy them.
After his death, the items which had been so much a part of his long working life were sent to Dulwich College and reside in the Woodhouse Library. Here we are, the great man's study, brought across from Long Island in New York. Woodhouse used to write down ideas in pencil, down with horror of cats, like Lord Roberts. Falls in love with a girl who keeps cats. Look at all this. The Royal Typewriter. This was his first book, I think. Yeah. The Pot Hunters. A public school of pot hunters. To William Townend, these first fruits of a genius at which the world will shortly be amazed. You see if it won't, from the author, P.G. Woodhouse. I wonder, modest, kindly, innocent man that he was, I wonder if he realized just how much of a genius he was, and how much those words would come true. The world would be amazed.
For viewers in the West Midlands and Yorkshire, that was the last programme on BBC2 on Analogue television. From tomorrow morning, BBC2 will be digital only in these areas. Services will be off air tonight whilst the final engineering works are carried out. From 6 a.m. tomorrow, you may need to retune your preview television or box to continue watching BBC2.
What makes a house home to a